My name is Christine Regemer. I'm with the Ochsner Public Relations team. Thank y'all so much for joining us today for this briefing about Ochsner enrolling the next cohort, ages 5 to 11, for the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine trial in New Orleans. Today, we are joined by Dr. Julia Garcia-Diaz, the Director of Clinical Infectious Diseases Research and Infectious Disease Specialist at Ochsner, and then Dr. William Linares, our System Chair of Pediatrics at Ochsner Hospital for Children. So just before we get started and hand it over to Dr. Garcia-Diaz, if everyone could still be on mute, we are going to be recording the session and sending it to y'all afterwards as a link, but you can record as well on your end if you would prefer to capture the footage that way. We will have Q&A at the end, and if you have questions, just pop them into the chat, or you can unmute yourself at the end. So. All right, well, let's kick it off with Dr. Garcia-Diaz. Could you share a few key messages and key updates for the group?
Let's unmute. Thank you for everyone to being here. We are going into our next phase of the pediatric COVID vaccine trial. We enrolled our first patient at 8 o'clock this morning, and we'll continue through over the next few weeks doing the 5 to 11, the 2 to 5, and then the 6 to 24 months of age. So that's our goal for the next few weeks or so. As you all know, children are certainly different, and we need to ensure that they respond to the vaccine and how their immune systems are just as they're different as from the adult population that we just finished looking at. As we move through this, we encourage everyone to get their vaccine so that we can sort of end this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you speak to Ochsner's ongoing role in clinical research, specifically for COVID?
And so for COVID and also for vaccines, so we have started doing the vaccine trials dating back to last year, August or so, when we started with our first clinical trial for adults. And we have engaged in a number of trials, probably in excess of 30 or so, from vaccines to therapeutics. The last one that we completed in terms of vaccines was the adolescents, which went to approval for emergency use last for the 12 to 15. We are currently engaging in the children's trial, the ones from 6 months of age to 12 to 11, actually, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. So these are the cohorts that will be being seen over the next few weeks.
And could you provide an overview for the group of how this trial will work and if there's any differences from the adult trial?
So this trial is going to, in terms of the length of time, the children will be followed probably be about 18 months or so. So a total of 4,500 children are going to be enrolled, not just in the United States, but also globally. So there are a number of countries abroad that will be participating in this trial as well. There are 2 locations in Louisiana, and we're one of those who will be enrolling for this trial. So the children need to participate, as well as obviously their parents or guardian, as far as the enrollment and consenting for the trial. Our first patient, as we mentioned a minute earlier, was this morning, and it went quite well. The child was excited to participate. So this is a placebo-controlled study, although it's different than the adults. The adults was 1-to-1, which means that 50% got the vaccine and 50% got placebo. This is a 2-to-1, which means that 66% will get the vaccine and only 25%. So it's a little bit different from that. Will get the vaccine. So your chances of getting the vaccine are certainly much greater. So the patient, the subject, the child, when they first present, they will get a blood draw, a nasal swab, and then after the consent has occurred, and then will receive the injection, whether that's placebo or vaccine. And then they would certainly be followed for the dynamics for all of those months thereafter. And they will need to notify us whether they have any colds, fevers, or any of that, as those are important points for us to follow throughout the trial. 6 months after the injection, which is a little bit different than the adults, when initially got designed, after 6 months after the second injection, all participants will be unblinded unless there has been approval prior to that, and they will receive the vaccine, those who did not.
Thank you. And what is the email address for folks who might be interested in COVID research participating?
So it's COVID vaccine at Ochsner.org. And so COVID vaccine is easy and Ochsner, OCHS and ER at .org. And so you can email us for interest. And what will happen when you email us, you will get a auto reply, which you'll have the link to enter the information for your child.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia-Diaz. We're going to toss it over to Dr. Linares now. Dr. Linares, could you speak to the importance of vaccination for pediatric patients? Oh, Dr. Linares, hang on, let me unmute you.
Gotcha. Sure.
Okay, there you go, you're unmuted.
Okay. At the highest level, if we think about this at the community level, it's as critically important for children to be vaccinated as it is adults. What we're all trying to achieve here is herd immunity, the term that many of you all have heard. And what that means is that if a person were to get infected, there are so many people immune that it would be almost impossible or very unlikely for them to encounter somebody during the transmission period who they could give it to, if that makes sense. So that's a simple way of thinking about what herd immunity is. And children are certainly approximately a third of our population. You could even make an argument that they circulate more in the community, often more than adults. So it's very important that children be part of the overall push to get herd immunity, to kind of snuff this virus out by not making it possible for it to transmit to anybody susceptible. It's probably become more and more important that this occurs because of some of the variants that you all have heard about and that the public has read about in the news. And the good news is that so far, those are generally susceptible to the virus, to the vaccine. So again, the push is to get as many members of the community vaccinated as possible. On top of that, I would say, and now we'll move down to pediatrics a little bit. We have been saying since the very beginning of this pandemic that children generally are much, much less likely to get critically ill or to be hospitalized or to have sort of a serious course of infection. But that doesn't mean none. And here at Ochsner Hospital for Children, we continue to this day to take care of children in the hospital who are amongst the rare subgroup that do get serious infection. And so, you know, at the more individual level, while children are much less likely to get serious illness, it can happen. And as parents, we should all want our children to be protected from this infection, just like we protect them from pertussis and tetanus and polio.
Thank you, Dr. Linares. And now I'd like to open up the floor. If anyone has questions, y'all can unmute yourself one at a time, please, and we'll take it from there. Or you can add it into the chat box. I haven't seen any come through that way.
Hi, if you can hear me, it's Sabrina Wilson at Fox 8. So how many children are expected to take part in this trial? Heard you say, Dr. Garcia Diaz, about 4,500 globally, but how many at Oxford?
So we expect probably about 70, 75, so somewhere around that number for the cohorts is what we expect right now. And so the goal with that is to have the equal number of subjects per site and to sort of be able to have that diversity throughout all sites and all countries that are currently participating.
Hey all, this is Yusuf Radat at The Advocate. I just had a quick question. I know with some of these vaccine trials, is there any plans with this particular trial that you all will do kind of tweaking with the dosage since children are just, smaller than adults?
So a few weeks ago, probably more than a few weeks now, the phase 1 piece of this trial started at a very much smaller number of sites, about 4 or so. And they enrolled patients in the same cohorts, and there was a very intense analysis of multiple doses. So that's how we're coming up with the doses for this 5 to 11, 2 to 4, and 6 to 24 months. So you're right, the dose is not the same. The doses will be different, and that has those doses have come about some sort of very rigorous looking at multiple doses to arrive at the dose that we'll be using for the children.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you brought up, because parents are worried about, is my child going to get the same dose that I got? And in fact, what Dr. Garcia Diaz is saying is they have titrated the doses down, just like we might do with other vaccines, so that there are pediatric doses being used.
Much better set from a pediatrician. Thank you.
And Dr. Linares, would you recommend parents out there, if they have questions, to speak with their pediatrician as a resource?
Absolutely. I mean, all of the professional and academic organizations that represent pediatricians have strongly endorsed vaccination of obviously first adults in the family, and now as we progress through demonstrating the safety in progressively younger groups and children, the American Academy of Pediatrics, for example, which is our largest professional organization, and all of us here at Ochsner Hospital for Children would endorse vaccinating your child as quickly as possible once the vaccine is approved by the FDA for administration in their age group.
It's Sabrina Wilson again. So will the kids who are like 6 months old get the same dose as a kid who's between 5 and 11?
Probably not. There'll probably be a different dose, but we do not know that at this time. We're not enrolling that cohort at this point. So the only dose that we have available right now is the 5 to 11. And so the decisions for the other 2 groups will be decided by Pfizer and all the scientific personnel at Pfizer, and we do not have that available at this time.
Do we have any other questions from the group? All right, well, we're gonna call it wraps. Thank y'all so much again for joining us this afternoon so we could share these key updates with y'all.